for me tonight. I spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive. Let's get lost tonight. Lord, who's on my
right? Hello, wackos. Welcome to another episode of Without a Country. I am Corinne Fisher. Welcome to the show. On this show, we tackle the news of the week from the perspective of the right and the left, and we find some sense of sanity and truth in the middle. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello to my dictator, Christopher Fungi. Hello to my capitalist pigs and my cuties. If you're wondering, what is this lady talking about? Well, we have a Patreon subscription as well where you can help support the show and all the independent research that we do. I myself am not a journalist. I am not an investigator, but I am someone who uses critical thinking and fact checks things that I see online, which I think is going to be a tool that we're all going to need to use starting right now, starting yesterday. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to help support the show, it's patreon.com/withoutaCountry. And we have, honestly, considering the administration that we are living under here in America, I would say this is a tamer week. You know, it's 3 people died on a cruise ship. We got the FBI ripping off the Beastie Boys. We have some voting rights being repealed. So this for this administration, almost seemingly a tame week, but we're going to get through everything together. If you want to send me an email, it's withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. And I do, of course, have my sidekick, Alfred, here. Come here, Alfred. Say hi to everyone. Well, he doesn't want to. He's in his bed right now, but he'll pop by later, I'm sure. He's in his bed right next to me. And let's get into it. Let's start with the enemy of the state this week. This week's enemy of the state are, as a throwback, I'm doing the Columbine shooters, right? And it's because I saw this CNN paid subscribers only article. It originated online, and I wanted to look more into this, or the story I found online. It didn't necessarily originate online, although the story does take place on the internet. It says these moms had daughters sucked into a deadly online school shooter community. What they need you to know. And this is by Mina Durson, again from CNN. Jamie Seitz loved to make crafts for her daughter, Audrey Hine. So when Audrey asked for customized t-shirts, Seitz got out her supplies and went to work. She didn't recognize the slogans Audrey wanted. One shirt was supposed to say natural selection and the other wrath, and thought it must be slang she didn't know. And that, that's, and again, I don't want to criticize Jamie because she did lose her daughter, but I do feel like, just the same as before we repeat something that we see in the news, if your kid asks you to make a t-shirt with some kind of lingo that you don't understand, just look into it, because you never know, and better safe than sorry, right? It was only after the death by suicide of Audrey, a 13-year-old who did well in school and who loved Eminem, Olivia Rodrigo, and dirt bikes, that her mother learned the significance. Natural selection and wrath were on the shirts worn by Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold when they killed 13 people and then themselves at Columbine High School in April 1999. Ushering in a new era of the particularly American horror of school massacres, and Audrey wanted to honor the shooters. I put together the puzzle, and it was the final piece of I can't believe I made these, Seitz told me. I wanted to vomit. And, girl, you were just trying to do something, to make a craft for your daughter. So, again, I don't think that anything you did caused the outcome that it caused. So you're just trying to be a good mom. She now believes her child was pulled into a disturbing online network known as the True Crime Community, or TCC, a name users have given to the unregulated spaces where children and adults obsess about mass shootings and the killers themselves. Most people in these forums will not go on to violence, but Seat says the group is full of pressure to kill others or yourself. Somebody should have known, Seat says. I wish it was me because I'm her mother and I should have known, and I'll forever live with that, but I didn't know. I also think, like, as someone who grew up half in a time when you didn't have the internet and half in a time that you did, probably like by middle school, I was like in AOL chat rooms, and I had parents who were very involved in my life, but I was still, pretending to be grown adult women in AOL chat rooms. I mean, sure, just because I am who I am, I was doing things like in all caps, continually screaming the theme song to The Nanny, and I wasn't really doing anything, sexual or explicit. But my parents didn't know what I was doing for hours on the computer. They weren't over my shoulder. And that was a computer that was in the family room. So now, in a time when we all have internet on our phones, like, it is pretty much impossible to, it's impossible to know what your teenager is doing before cell phones and the internet all the time. And so it's not possible to know. There has to be some trust. And, I just hope this woman isn't continuously beating herself up, even though I think that she probably is. I thought this was interesting just because Columbine was so relevant during my formative years. I mean, this was like our introduction as a society to school shootings, basically. I lived through it. I was there. I became, I don't want to say obsessed with it, but I was certainly very interested in this story. And it's just so wild that all these, years later, that Eric and Dylan are still influencing young people in a weird way. That's why I chose the story. That's why I found it so interesting. Heather Dianoff didn't fully understand what was happening to her daughter either, as Liliana too dove into the TCC, idolized killers, wrote a hate-filled manifesto, and made a long list of those she wanted to kill at her school. And for those of you who are maybe too young or just don't remember the Columbine shootings, I've actually even been to the Columbine Memorial at Columbine High School. And what is interesting is, it was very often talked about, and of course, this is no excuse for gunning down your schoolmates, but that Eric and Dylan were people who were really ostracized in their school, and everyone treated them like shit, basically. And it was kind of a lot of normies against them. And, they were part of this group called the Trenchcoat Mafia. And, at first it blamed it blamed Marilyn Manson, at first, somehow got involved. And they were blaming Marilyn Manson because they said they listened to his music. So basically anyone who's been to high school before can read between the lines and just knows that Eric and Dylan seemingly were just outcasts who were into goth stuff, but also obviously had a really deep darkness, probably suffering from depression, aggression, and we're like, you know what, we're going to do something about this. And unfortunately, their solution, in quotes, was to kill a lot of people. And one of the things that really stood out to me at the Columbine Memorial is that, they have these, plaques etched that are, and in it is inscribed or etched, I don't know how you would call it, but statements from the families of the survivors. And even in those statements on the memorial, obviously I don't think that they should be speaking highly of Dylan and Eric, but the language that they use to describe Dylan and Eric, I don't know how to explain this, but you can tell that they were people who were spoken about in very bad derogatory terms even before they did this. You can just tell that the community looked down upon these people even before they committed these atrocities. And again, I'm not saying, of course, they're children. I'm not saying anyone deserved to be gunned down because of it. But you can piece the story that you heard on the news together with the pieces that you're seeing in the memorial. Like, it was certainly clear that at least some of that story had to be true. And again, not an excuse, but you see, it wasn't like everyone was nice to them all day and they just came in completely unprovoked and decided to murder everyone at the school. Or it wasn't that they were just going through something personally or at home and they were like, I'm going to come in and take down the school. It was obvious that they were treated like shit and bullied, and their, again, unfortunate solution was to gun down a lot of school members. But there was other things going on too. That I believe that, if I'm remembering this correctly, that they were asking people before they shot them whether or not they believed in God, and people who believed in God or subscribed to Christianity, they were definitely killing at a higher rate. Again, I'm just piecing this together a lot from memory. I didn't fully dive back into Columbine, but it is just interesting looking back, and also horrific looking back. And now knowing how, I hate to say commonplace, but commonplace is kind of the word school shootings are now these days. Columbine shook society when it happened. It was all we were talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks, and now school shootings happen, and it's part of the news cycle for, I don't know, 24 to 48 hours, if that. And sometimes there's so many mass shootings that they don't even get full coverage. Like, even this week, I believe in the past week, that we had like 2 other mass shootings. And, I was like, I don't even know what to say to cover it, because there's nothing really to cover it except for, more people died. Like, we need gun control that we're certainly not getting during this administration. And how many lives are going to be lost before we absolutely decide to do something? As a mom, she was even a little comforted that Liliana had found some friends online after struggling to fit in their small town. I probably was a little naive to it. I really was. Diana said, I am just a normal everyday mom, just trying to make it through life. The last thing in the world that I ever imagined my kid would be involved with was a crime community that was actually considering committing crimes in the real world. And again, like, this is like, it is not, it's not weird. I mean, I guess some people think it's weird, but it's not really like weird for a young person to be interested in, serial killers. I guess this one is a little bit weirder because they're more modern in their crimes. This is things that was part of the news today, not like a serial killer from the 1970s that you saw a Netflix documentary about. But I don't think this is completely wild where, these moms should have been like, oh, I can't believe I missed all the signs. Because, especially when you're in middle school and high school, it's kind of normal to be into weird things or obsessed with the macabre. Like, I certainly spent a lot of time reading all of this stuff. It didn't at any point make me want to be violent against anybody, but it was something I was interested in and was reading about for sure. Liliana told her plans to a therapist who called for help, and the teen was hospitalized. She's now 18 and hoping to help other children see everything that is wrong with the TCC. Over the last year, I have talked or exchanged messages with more than a dozen people formerly or currently active in the community. Many told me they were lonely or depressed, and the TCC was the only place they felt they belonged. Others said their interest was effectively academic and they loved to research cases. Everyone told me they did not condone violence. Most said their parents had no idea what they were doing online. I think that's very common. That was the case with Seats and Dianoff, but both moms say that there is more they wish they'd done and more other adults and corporations could have done too. Doodling love hearts for a killer. Seats was a young mom, able and happy to share clothes, cosmetics, and girl talk with her daughter. But she was also the kind of mom to delve through Audrey's backpack looking for a missing assignment or to read the notes left out as she cleaned her child's room. I thought I knew everything about my daughter, she said. The overwhelming grief of losing a child became even worse when a detective gave her a notebook from Audrey's locker. It was covered in pencil drawings of the Columbine killers, surrounded by hearts and doodled phrases like Eric Harris, "You're my idol," and Audrey Klebold, her name blended with that of a murderer, alongside harmless teenage musings like a wish list including gum and pimple patches. Audrey had drawn violent images and copied instructions for how to make a pipe bomb. It was like if somebody was to tell you there's aliens invading the earth, that's how it felt, Seats said. And again, I think it's like, yeah, we all have a part of ourselves that is hidden from even the people who are closest to us. I think that is extremely human and normal. Frantically, she started looking up the TCC on social media, where she discovered kids posting similar drawings and wearing the same shirts Audrey had requested. It was so hard for me to comprehend, not only that she purposely took her life, but that she was a part of some extremist group, Seat says. The TCC is a sprawling network of deeply troubling content that, despite internet companies' best efforts to ban it, continues to pop up in the darkest corners of most major social media platforms. Users share research, pictures, videos, drawings, and memes from major school shootings, with Columbine the dominant obsession. And I'm guessing it's because it's kind of the one that started it all. It's the OG school shooting, for lack of a better saying. And connect through a series of ever-changing hashtags adapted to avoid content restrictions. At its core, the true crime community is an online fandom that researches, obsesses over, and glorifies mass killers, explained Cody Zoshak, a senior analyst at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, which monitors the TCC as part of its work on online extremism. In many cases, this bleeds over into the use of violence and the imitation of these attackers. And again, this also kind of reminded me of the Rape Academy that we were talking about a couple, weeks ago. And I think it is naive to think that only men or only incels are online in online groups discussing extremist ideas. I definitely think even being involved in the political world, just like on the extreme left, I follow accounts where not all the time, obviously, but every now and then they post something, and I'm just like, this is pretty extremist. I don't think this is a shared point of view by actually that many people. I don't think this is like a smart idea. I don't think this is brotherly or sisterly, like in any way. But if I was in an online group, maybe about leftist politics, probably everyone in that group would share that idea. And so that would definitely skew my worldview when and that's, part of the danger of being in an echo chamber is not only that, you know, it's not only that you don't know what's going on with other people, you don't know other people's wants, needs, your personal views are never questioned, but it also, I think, completely skews your worldview because you're all seeing it through this like shared lens, which part of it might be accurate, but it's probably definitely not fully accurate, because you're just not seeing the nuance. Since January 2024, ISD has linked the TCC to at least 25 attacks or disrupted plots almost entirely targeting schools. Those include Colt Gray, who authorities say had a shrine to a school shooter in his bedroom before allegedly killing 4 people at his Georgia high school; Natalie Rupnow, who was found dead with an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound in an attack in a Wisconsin school that killed 2 people and injured 6 more; and Solomon Henderson, who live streamed himself before he opened fire in his school cafeteria in Tennessee, where 1 student died. And I think, unfortunately, like just the same as you would have a poster of, or from my instance, like a poster of the Spice Girls in my room, because those were women that I aspired to be like, or who I loved or idolized. The same is true as if you have aspirations of, changing the world. There are various ways to change the world. You can change the world by becoming a famous pop star. You can change the world by becoming president, but you can also change the world by taking, lives, especially, in groups like this. I am sure they were giving, many reasons, offering many reasons why Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold took the lives of their students. And some, especially when you're going through peer pressure or you're being bullied, can start to make sense. Even me as an outsider, as an adult now, but as a teenager at the time when it happened, like, I didn't condone it then and I don't condone it now, but like, did I partly understand? Do I know how awful and mean people can be, especially in a school setting? Absolutely, Um, so again, like, and I think when you're in when you're in a depressed headspace, things like this can really seem like a solution, even though they're, gonna be the end of your life for sure, or the end of your life, whether it's because you end up in prison for killing other people, or the end of your life because you take your own life ultimately. Zoshak said the stereotypical TCC member was a younger teenage girl just like Audrey, though there were many other people and the gender balance seemed to be roughly 50-50. More than any one demographic group, the community is a magnet for those struggling to fit in, Zoshak said. Seats guesses this is what drew Audrey in. She was bullied, she says. She felt outcasted and found her group online. She believes what Audrey experienced in the TCC was grooming. It feels like you're in a cult, but there isn't one leader. They feed off of each other, she said. She was sucked into this. It's kind of like the DSA. You guys aren't going to like that, but there's if you can't see that there's bullying in the DSA, which is why it's like every time I knock the DSA, it has nothing to do with like the socialist concepts. It has like 90% to do with the bullying if you don't agree with every single tenant to a T that they offer you. And obviously I'm not alone in that. That's why Chiose is in and out of the DSA every single week. If you don't know who he is, he's like a really popular city council member here in New York City who's doing a lot for lease theft actually. Or sorry, not Lisa, deed theft is what I meant to say. Forensic psychologist Dr. Rachel Tolles described how young people can become seduced by the TCC. First, they'll just be curious about it, and then they'll maybe go a little harder. She said of someone's interest, then fascination, then emulation of a killer. They think, well, they like that band and they wore that t-shirt. What if I wore that t-shirt and they started feeling like the world was no good and maybe the world isn't any good? What we're actually talking about is connection, she added. These kids are desperate for connection. So again, it's a conversation that we have a lot more about, conservative young men on the right. But obviously this issue with connection is something that everyone is kind of experiencing. And you certainly don't need to be MAGA to do something hurtful to yourself or others in a quest for connection. Seats knew Audrey had learned about Columbine as she learned about 9/11 and other national tragedies, but she warns parents now that any focus on school shootings should be questioned at home and in the classroom. I would, if I went to school in today's society, I would have been questioned so much. Instead, I just got voted most unique, and that's how we did it back in the day. She said Audrey's school posted a picture of her wearing one of her Columbine shirts, a red flag that no one saw. And I think it's already hard for adults to keep up with young people's lingo. And I think even harder in an online world where things move faster. And unfortunately, the thing that is harming a lot of students, which is, their access to the internet, they're also just better at navigating. So, it even said earlier in the article, like these kids are really internet savvy. They know when the algorithm catches up with a particular hashtag that they change it, and they are able to do it swiftly and they probably can just move at a pace that outruns the adults in the FBI, because like you can study something all day, but if you grew up in an internet world, it is just so much easier to navigate. From fandom to fixation. From what she has pieced together from her daughter's online history, Seats believes Audrey's pipeline to the TCC started from the video game platform Roblox as young as 8 years old. Other users invited her to connect on platforms like TikTok or private chats on Discord, and Seats thinks Audrey consumed this kind of content off and on until her death. She blames the platforms for not having enough safeguards and has filed a lawsuit against Roblox, Discord, TikTok, and its parent company ByteDance. The lawsuit, which is in its early stages, argues in part that Audrey was pushed to suicide by an online community dedicated to glorifying violence and emulating notorious mass shooters, a community that can thrive and prey upon young children like Audrey. And while obviously I think she has every right to sue these companies and file these lawsuits, and I do think that they are certainly much more focused on making money and keeping us online, and they don't care if we're safe online or if we're not safe online. What I also think is that parenting techniques and what we teach children needs to catch up at a swift pace. The whole the biggest thing, and I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago when I was young, was like getting abducted. That was the thing. That was the thing we were worried about, getting abducted. So since I was a little girl, my parents, specifically my mom, would have conversations with us about being abducted. Everyone was terrified of young people getting abducted. And so I had a plan with my family, like if a stranger comes up to you, this is what you say. If you need to get out of a situation you're in, this is where we meet up. This is the signs. This is who you can trust. These are, okay people to pick you up from school. These are not. And I think, maybe that's less common now, although that still happens. But something that we have to be really careful about is how we're interacting with people online, and not just like one bad guy, also groups, ideas. And just the same as adults, we've had to learn very quickly how to differentiate fact from fiction online, and understand when someone is sharing their opinion versus when someone is sharing something that is factual. Kids also need to know how to do that. And I know it sounds crazy, but things like, how to figure out if you're in a cult, or how do you feel if you're or how to figure out like if you're accidentally in an extremist group. These are things that we need to be teaching children now. It's just like the way the world is. The platforms told CNN they have policies against violence and extremism, and have teams to monitor this content. Material can be removed, users banned, and law enforcement alerted, they said. A Roblox spokesperson said, our multi-layer safety system is designed to help protect users from such content or behavior, and includes advanced AI-powered detection, dedicated monitoring teams, 24/7 moderation, and robust user reporting tools. But again, it's like, if everyone's in an extremist group together, they are not going to be reporting on each other, most likely. And AI power detection is laughable, I'm sure, to a lot of people, especially when there has been, a slew of people who have killed themselves because of AI. So for AI to now be in charge of ensuring our safety seems kind of ironic, Roblox said it was continuing to evolve its system, as did Discord. A Discord spokesperson said real-world violence of any kind is devastating, especially when it impacts teens, and content that glorifies or encourages this behavior has no place on Discord. I mean, they're just copying and pasting the same exact statement about anything. They don't give a shit. They're the only thing that's going to make them care is if it starts affecting their profit margin, or if it starts affecting someone in their own family. Other than that, these companies do not give a shit about you. And you can tell from the absolute garbage copy and pasted sentence that everyone, gives in their publicity statement. TikTok's community guidelines include this sentence in bold: we don't allow threats, glorifying violence, or promoting crimes that could harm people, animals, or property. And I mean, this is absolutely not true. Anyone who's been online as a woman, anyone who's been online as a comedian, anyone who's been online right now, I'm going to say, again, people are not going to like this, but like as a Jew, the crazy things I've seen about Jews lately, just in almost the comment section of everything, truly, whether it has anything to do with Israel or Jews aren't even mentioned. If it could be an article truly about like dogs finding a home, and if something bad happened in it, they would somehow say, I bet a Jew was behind that, and we should exterminate them all. I have seen the phrase exterminate Jews hundreds and hundreds of times in the past year. And, this has nothing to do, and we don't need to keep, saying the same robotic catchphrases that everyone loves to say, like anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Yeah, no, it's not. I'm not saying that. All I am saying is there's a wild uptick in saying specifically horrible things about Jews. Women, there's not an uptick. They're just always they've just never cared about that. They just never even looked at it. And certainly it's commentary, that I used to see a lot more about Black people, but I think now that they have skewed over to the Jews. And before you step in, every time I saw it about Black people, I certainly did report it. Thank you. All right. Liliana found the community at the age of 9 after seeing a video romanticizing Klebold, who she thought was kind of cute. She started to read stories about the Columbine killers that painted them as bullied outcasts and began to imagine a kinship. It was like I had never felt more recognized by someone, she says. My anger felt like theirs. My sadness felt like theirs. Her mother would sometimes hear some of her online conversations. There were a couple of times I wanted to bust in there and say, hey, I think you should get off the computer, Dianoff said, but she never did. I just wanted to not believe it, that it wasn't serious, she said. I trusted her. Dianoff would change that if she could. You've got to know what your kids are doing, she says. Be intrusive, go in there, bust in the door, look at the computer, take it, read it. I gave her too much freedom. I also don't know that that's the solution either, but Liliana thinks the TCC should be viewed in the same way as 764, another disturbing online community which has been designated a terrorist organization. The government has not explicitly named the TCC as an extremist group, and the FBI declined our requests for comment. ISD categorizes the TCC under the FBI's new class of terrorism, nihilistic violent extremism, or violence for the sake of violence, not driven by a specific ideology. I mean, I would say there's an ideology there. It's being an outcast. Like that's the ideology. We talk so much about like stopping bullying, but what happens when the bullied decide to become the violent? I guess people didn't see that coming. Experts like Tolles and Zoshak said it would be almost impossible to shut the community down, and more effective strategy to safeguard individuals is real personal engagement. People are looking for acceptance. They are looking for community. They're looking to be valued, Zoshak says. I think people are looking to be heard, Seat said parents can have a key role letting their children know that it's okay to be different, but it's dangerous when it leads to self-harm or wanting to hurt others. That strikes a chord with Liliana. I wish somebody would have looked at me and said, you need help. You need serious help, she said. All right. But I think that's also easy to say in like retrospect. Like, what if when she was, in the TCC hardcore, someone had just been like, you need help. What? Okay. And now on to our next story. This is one of the main stories of the week. Definitely, I think this is the biggest story of the week. It's the Hantavirus that is happening on this cruise ship, and there is something specifically very, I hate to say entertaining, but interesting about cruise ship drama and just things happening on a cruise ship, because you are just so locked on there. Again, that's why I hated I loved the entertainment on the cruise, but I don't think I'll ever go on a cruise again, because I just felt so trapped the entire time. And if something goes wrong, you're fucked. They're not pulling over this boat for anyone, right? So this is from The Atlantic. The Atlantic has been doing some great reporting this week. A lot of my pieces this week are from The Atlantic. This is this says by Catherine J. Wu, The Horror of a Hantavirus Cruise. Cruise ships are a paradise for pathogens, but a hantavirus outbreak is a first. And this is why, if you've ever been on a cruise, there's staff members before you go into any kind of communal area going washy, and you have to wash your hands constantly on a cruise, because it is a hotbed of viruses and germs, and it's you're floating around with the poop in tanks, and like it's just disgusting. Norovirus loves a cruise ship. So did the coronavirus, responsible for COVID-19. The crowded rooms, stuffy air, and communal dining of a giant boat filled with humans create the ideal conditions for pathogens to spread. Now, hantavirus, a highly deadly rodent-borne pathogen that typically spreads when people breathe in aerosolized feces or other bodily secretions of infected animals, may have discovered this too. The world now appears to be experiencing its first documented cruise ship Hantavirus outbreak. Over the weekend, health officials contacted the WHO. We haven't heard a lot about them since COVID, but they're back, baby, the World Health Organization, to report a cluster of serious illnesses aboard a cruise ship bound for South Africa. Among the roughly 150 passengers and crew on board, 3 have died and 4 have fallen ill, 1 critically ill. I know a lot of people are like, what the hell do you do with a dead body on a cruise? But apparently their crews have small morgues on board, because obviously someone could die of natural causes. They have nurses and stuff on board. You can go to a medical center on board. But yeah, they apparently do. Most cruise ships apparently have small morgues on board. So the body would be able to be refrigerated and properly. The vessel, the MV Hondius, is now anchored off the coast of Cabo Verde as those on the ship await further instructions. The situation is serious and frankly a bit unnerving. For now, officials are scrambling to assess the situation. Only 2 of the 7 supposed cases of hantavirus have been confirmed by laboratory testing. The rest are still suspected, according to the WHO. And as health officials investigate, more cases may appear. Hantavirus can simmer in the body for weeks before sparking symptoms, and the 7 people who have fallen sick so far might have all caught the virus through a common animal exposure before they got on the ship. But that's not guaranteed. The possibility remains that hantavirus-ridden rodents stowed away on the ship, which could mean more exposures, more illnesses, and perhaps even more deaths. A less likely but still very real alternative: people could be catching the virus from one another, which could pose an additional threat to those at the ship's destination and beyond, and to the healthcare workers treating them. At least one type of hantavirus may be capable of limited person-to-person transmission in situations involving close and prolonged contact, the sort that a cruise ship certainly encourages. And that version, known as the Andes version, just so happens to be found in Argentina, from where the ship departed just weeks ago. Researchers are sequencing the virus detected on board to confirm its identity, but currently our working assumption is that it's Andes virus. Maria van Kerkhove, the acting director of epidemic and pandemic management at the WHO, told me via email. No matter which version of reality this is, scores of people are now trapped on a cruise ship, potentially with a lethal virus that is perhaps being ferried about by infected rodents and or humans. The virus can kill up to half of the people it infects, so any further spread could have horrifying results. At least one person who fell ill was taken off the ship to be treated in a hospital. More evacuations are planned, but most of those on board have no clear indication of when they'll be free. Because obviously they're on the ship right now because they're like, yo, you got to quarantine in case until we figure out how to control this so we don't have COVID-19 too, Oceanwide Expeditions, the company operating the cruise, has said that the ship is facing a serious medical situation and that the company is cooperating with authorities and working to uphold stringent health and safety procedures. Eventually, of course, all of the ship's passengers will have to disembark. Spain has agreed to receive the ship in the Canary Islands. Still, health officials can't yet say how much risk the passengers and crew will pose to the broader global community. And again, similar to COVID-19, it kind of seems like everyone's like, okay, well, we're just kind of doing what we do with viruses in general, but we don't really know exactly how to handle this, how it's, exactly how it's spreading. Obviously, what the origin is, we're pretty sure, but we're not 100% sure. So a lot of acting in the dark here. All told, this incident is a deeply sobering reminder that cruise ships can be the setting for infectious disease nightmares because they offer pathogens so many simple opportunities to spread. The perils of cruise ships became painfully apparent during the early days of COVID when the coronavirus zoomed through hundreds of people aboard the Diamond Princess. In many ways, the ships represented and really embraced the exact conditions that the pandemic-wary were cautioned to avoid: close quarters, communal indoor dining, crummy ventilation in public spaces. That setup also favors the norovirus, one of the most common pathogens aboard cruise ships. Vikram Naranjan, a public health researcher at the University of Limerick in Ireland who has written about the vessel's risks, told me, Norovirus is wildly contagious and transmitted when people come into contact with infected feces or vomit. So just disgusting in general. Contaminated food, water, and surfaces are common culprits, easy to come across when dealing with shared utensils and cafeteria style dining. What's more, cruise ship interiors, where passengers from all around the world mingle and breathe in stale air, are especially friendly to any respiratory pathogens that make it on board. COVID, flu, and now perhaps hantavirus. And for a virus that seems capable of human to human spread, prolonged journeys that last for several weeks, like this one, are ripe for facilitating repeated exposure. The people suspected to have been sickened with hantavirus started showing symptoms several weeks apart, which raises the possibility that the illnesses represent a chain rather than a cluster of cases with the same source. Plus, one of the individuals who is ill and will soon be evacuated is reportedly the ship's doctor, a likely common contact of the confirmed cases. Van Kerkhove said the WHO team suspects that there may be multiple ways in which people have been infected through exposure to rodents, but also possibly through human to human transmission via close contact. The researchers were told rodents weren't on the ship, but I obviously can't confirm that, she added. As it's a ship, there is always the possibility. All things considered, it's increasingly looking as if there is at least some human-to-human transmission, Bill Hanaj, an epidemiologist at Harvard School of Public Health, told me. At the same time, Hanaj noted the cruise ship conditions that might have allowed for that sort of spread could be making it harder for scientists to confirm the possibility. Even on land, human-to-human transmission is very difficult to confirm. People who tend to spend a lot of time together are among the likeliest to spread disease to one another, but they're also prone to having the same exposure to an external source. Aboard a ship, even strangers are constantly schmoozing, widening the net that researchers have to cast. Neither Nuranjan nor Hanaj thinks the takeaway is to swear off cruise ships. Quite the opposite. Nuranjan said he'd still love to go on a cruise someday, but realistically, the risks are at least as high as they would be for any other packed, prolonged party. If nothing else, pathogens thrive on our fondness for one another. And so that's kind of just like an overview of what is happening from the Atlantic. But as this is, in my opinion, the main story of the week, I wanted to dig in a little deeper. So I do have some more pieces about this. I have the New York Post. I don't know if this one really offered more. They do think this tracked down the source in this article. Let's see. Yeah, so this says health officials think they've tracked down the cruise ship hantavirus outbreak. 2 MV Hondius passengers who died from hantavirus likely contracted the deadly infection while bird watching in Argentina, investigators believe, then brought it on board the now stranded cruise ship. Argentine officials say a Dutch couple that succumbed to the virus last month picked it up from rodents while visiting a landfill during a bird watching tour in the city of Ushuaia in mid-March, they told the Associated Press Wednesday. However, there's one big hole in the theory. Authorities previously said that the area and the surrounding province of Tierra del Fuego had never recorded a case of the hantavirus. The passengers then boarded the MV Hondius, which departed on its 35-day-long expedition trip from the Argentine port on March 20th. Hantavirus is usually transmitted by inhaling the virus, like we said, from infected feces or urine from mice or rats. The 70-year-old Dutchman reportedly began feeling sick on April 6th with a fever, a headache, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. He developed acute respiratory distress and died on April 11th, though his death wasn't linked to the rare hantavirus until weeks later. And I think they probably, obviously looked into it a little bit less because of his age. The man's body remained on board for the next 2 weeks, during which time his wife got sick. On April 25th, she flew with her husband's body to South Africa, where she died in a Johannesburg hospital. So, and you can only imagine, like, this poor woman was also tortured for 2 weeks when she was just still had to remain on a cruise ship with her husband's dead body, grieving, this poor woman. And then she got sick and then she died. 8 other passengers and crew members became sick with the virus over the following almost 2 weeks. And by May 2nd, a third passenger died on board the 353-foot Dutch vessel. On Wednesday, 3 patients, a 56-year-old British national, a 41-year-old Dutch citizen, and a 65-year-old German, believed to be infected with the virus, were also evacuated from the ship, which remained anchored off Cape Verde. So that's just a little more information on the death and what is happening. The passengers, 2 of whom are believed to be seriously ill, were evacuated in order to receive medical care in the Netherlands, the World Health Organization said. Eerie photos showed at least one of the patients wearing head-to-toe protective gear on a gurney as they were removed from an ambulance and escorted to a waiting jet at the port in Cape Verde's capital city, Praia. So again, very much COVID-19 vibes all over again, right? Among those evacuated with the ship was the ship's doctor, who once in serious condition but has improved, Spain's health ministry said. The passengers and crew members still left on the ship aren't showing any symptoms of the virus, which is typically contracted from inhaling infected rodent droppings. The unnerving development Wednesday comes as the boat is now expected to port and disembark in Tenerife, according to the WHO and the ship's operating company, Oceanwide Expeditions. Though that possibility is reportedly the source of tense debate between Spanish authorities. Fernando Clavijo, the incumbent president of the Canary Islands, told reporters Wednesday that his government has not received detailed information on how the process will be carried out and raised fears that passengers could spread the hantavirus to citizens. Representatives for Spain's central government have blasted his remarks as irresponsible, as health officials have said the risk of spreading hantavirus is very low, and given the fact that there are 14 Spanish nationals on board, El País reported. So again, it's like he's blasting it. They're saying like it's, very hard to transmit it, but like, is it, because the other article that we just read from The Atlantic certainly didn't make it seem like that. It made it seem like it wasn't really that black and white at all. Let's see. And this is an article about something else, I think. And then the third piece of information that I do find interesting is from the Instagram account, the Dre Dossier. We've talked about her before. She's a woman who does a lot of like independent investigations on things. And I'm not going to play the whole video, but I watched her video. And kind of, what she was talking about specifically was that, this is a cruise ship with, like 150 plus people on board, in a time when we are all, no matter if we are influencers or not, are posting with some, fervor on social media, right? This is like a very common, you don't have to be an online person. You don't have to be a young person to be posting online. And she said this is specifically interesting to her because one of the, TikTok subgenres she is most interested in is cruise drama. And she said, if you are someone who has been down the rabbit hole of TikTok cruise drama, that like if one person, takes a smelly poop basically on a cruise ship, there's 5, Instagram stories or TikToks about it. And so she said that, with something as haunting as what's going on this particular cruise ship, she finds it weird that only 2 people have been posting, and they are both travel influencers with a bunch of followers whose postings like seem to kind of not really add up with the story. And she's like, she was like, I don't have any, further conclusion than that, because she's like, I'm reporting and investigating on other things that are taking up my time. But she did point out that if this, just knowing what she knows about cruise ship TikToks and stuff, that it is really, really hard to believe with all the people on that cruise ship, only 2 people, again, both travel influencers. So she didn't really say this, but she said kind of, she implied that they were less trustworthy sources, which I do agree with, because like, we don't know, like, are they being paid off? If they were paid to go on the trip to begin with, I'm sure that the parent company of the cruise ship was probably like, hey, I'm going to give you, a couple thousand more dollars on top of the payment that you're already getting for taking this free cruise if you really control the narrative coming off this cruise ship. And she also pointed out that there was this picture where there was you see a lot of penguins, and it seemed like a moment that many people would want to capture with this beautiful orange pink sky. And she said they're only, the two influencers both posted pictures of this moment. In one picture, the sky was blue, and in one picture, the sky was a pink orange, which didn't make sense. And then she said, furthermore, it's so beautiful that if this was a real picture that really happened, that all these people on this cruise ship were privy to, that, there would be more pictures online from other people who were enjoying this cruise. She just said, she's I don't know exactly what's going on, but it just doesn't quite add up. And that does, make sense. It also seems like the travel influencers have both been downplaying the situation a little bit. One person kind of said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but they said something to the effects of yeah, even though this is not an ideal situation, spirits are good, people are watching movies, kind of whatever. And yes, part of the reason that people couldn't be would not be posting as much, one, offered theory was that, because they're quarantined in their rooms, so they're not doing a lot of activities. But we all know when you are quarantined and you're with, yourself or only one other person, where are you going to, entertain yourself? You're on your phone. You're going to be on your phone nonstop. And yes, part of that is you're going to be doom scrolling, but there's not a chance in hell that multiple people wouldn't decide to vlog this, especially knowing that they could possibly monetize it, that they could specifically get help for themselves and their family. And I thought these were really good points that just absolutely didn't match up. So it seems like there could be a larger story here about, possibly having limited internet access for these people, having, threatened them basically, or have offered them, something hey, if you guys don't post, we will give you X, Y, and Z for free. But it does seem like something is going on to control the narrative, because she said, how can spirits be high? Be high. 3 people died on this cruise. People get hysterical over much, much less. She's 3 people are dead. That's crazy. And I really agree with her on that. Because again, if there was an outbreak, if people started getting sick, if there was a flood, we've seen the cruises where, the sewage isn't draining properly and, it starts flooding. People go full hysteria. So this doesn't really add up. I found a Boston, what is this? Boston Metro article. Boston Globe, maybe. I had to put it through an archive, so I don't know. But it says what's happening right now. It's a local Boston periodical. What's happened right now is very real, says Boston travel influencer on Hantavirus trip. So this is another one. This is more travel information to see if this is taking it a little bit more seriously in the written word than they were in their 2-camera videos. And this is the Boston Globe, by the way. A Boston-based travel influencer has shared his experience aboard a cruise ship in quarantine off Cape Verde. Jake Rosemarin, who posts videos of his travels to tens of thousands of followers on social media. And this is one of the 2 people that the Dre dossier was going over, again, mostly through his original content, not the content shared with other outlets, said in an emotional video posted Monday that he was aboard the MV Hondius, where nearly 150 passengers and crew isolated due to the outbreak of Hantavirus. I normally wouldn't make a video like this, but I feel like I need to say something, he said, adding that what's happening right now is very real for all of us here. The WHO said Tuesday it had identified 7 cases of Hantavirus. 3 people have died. I'm going to move on to quotes for him. If you're seeing coverage about this, just remember that there are real people behind it, and this isn't something happening somewhere far away, Rosemarin said in the video, fighting back tears. It's happening to us right now. So I guess this was the influencer who was taking it more seriously. There was another influencer who was kind of people are still in good spirits, Let's see. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's the hardest part, Rosemarin said in the video. All we want right now is to feel safe, to have clarity, and get home. Rosemarin did not immediately return a message from the Globe. In an earlier post, he said he would not make any public comment out of respect for those involved. He also said that he was feeling well and was grateful to the crew for handling a very difficult situation with care. Oh no, he also added, everyone on board is doing okay, and the focus continues to be on keeping everyone safe and informed. So he is still crying though. So it's, to push back against Stray Dossier, it's like, all right, well, he's not being emotional at all about it. So like if a man is crying on camera, I feel like there has to be some form of stress that he's under. But I do agree it's weird that only 2 people are posting and they're both influencers. So again, really speaking to the fact that they were both probably getting this trip for free. Both already had been paid off by this, cruise company. Just trying to focus on the positive, think about the good things, and keep a smile on my face, he wrote in a story post. She also pointed out that some of the videos, or at least one of the videos that he shared with news outlets, he did not share on his own personal social media, which she found to be weird. Officials on Tristan da Cunha said the Hondius visited the island from April 13th through 15th as part of an island hopping voyage that also made calls at St. Helena and Ascension Island. No cases of the virus had been identified on the islands as of Monday, and officials said there was no significant cause for concern. But the WHO has said it is investigating the possibility of human-to-human transmission. So again, that seems to be the big thing. Like, how, when we gauge how in danger are the remaining passengers on this ship, and do they need to continue to quarantine when they get off? It seems like they definitely do. Like, I certainly wouldn't want to be around any of the people who came off that. All right, moving right along here. Let's give a quick shout out again to our dictator, Christopher Fungi. Hello to my capitalist pigs and my cuties. I know I said hello to you at the top, but again, if you want to join the Patreon, it's patreon.com/withoutaCountry, and you can be a member for as little as $6 a month, and you get an additional video news story every single week. But Christopher Fungi gets his own story shared on the show once a month. That is part of his dictator privileges. And last time we read something, a very long article. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was about like book bans, I believe, right? Book bans, freedom of speech, that's sort of thing. But yeah, it was like book bans. If my memory serves me, but it was a very long article. So I think, Christopher, you just love a long article, because he then shared with me an article where the reading time is 45 minutes. So we're not going to share that on the show, about data centers. But in general, I had actually been reading a lot about data centers and seen a lot of articles about data centers. And I know you guys are very interested in AI in general and its effects on the world. And, especially because a lot of you tend to be left leaning, the left really anti AI. Again, I'm more in the middle, like, again, I'm pretty aligned with Bernie Sanders' feelings on this, where it's like, this could be a really wonderful tool to use for the future, but we have to really be careful who is at the helm, what they're using it to control, how they're monetizing it. And again, I think most importantly, like, who is at the helm, who is introducing who is controlling this. And so Christopher, he offered initially this article that takes place in his hometown about data centers. And again, there have been so many people showing up locally to meetings, to town hall meetings, to protest data centers. Basically, anytime one is going to show up in a county or a town, people are not happy about it. And that's something that we have to think of. It's like, okay, well, if we do want AI, we don't want to be like a NIMBY about it, not in my backyard. We don't want to be like, well, I think that AI should exist, but no, I don't want a data center anywhere near me. It's like, well, okay, well, if that's your thoughts on it, then where do the data centers have to exist? Where are we putting them? Right. So I think that's another part of the conversation, because I think people are like fine with AI as long as the data center is not anywhere near them. So this is from WFMZ.com. Opposition grows as residents push back on proposed data center in Northampton County. And again, this is something that I've seen in so many local news stories. Like, again, anytime that a data center is popping up, the people in the town are saying, hell no. So this is Lower Mount Bethel, Pennsylvania, a group opposing a proposed, and a lot of people have been winning these fights too. So if one's going to pop up in your town, organize and be loud about it. It's a battle you can win. A group opposing a proposed data center in Northampton County turned out people for a township supervisors meeting Monday night. Lower Mount Bethel Township still hasn't received a formal proposal for the data center, but people are already organizing in a big way to fight it. The group, No Data Center LMBT, has slowly been gathering neighbors together to fight the proposed project off of Martins Creek Belvedere Highway. Neighbors like Matt Hackenberg, who lives just up the road. You can sit out here at night and it's quiet. You can hear the insects. It's nice and peaceful and quiet. The thought of having a constant hum of fans going is also, it's soul crushing, said Hackenberg. A website for the data center project argues it will increase the tax base and bring in a lot of jobs to the area. That's always the fucking argument. They always say, but it's like, can you really trust think of the irony here. Can you really trust a data center, which at its core, AI is, of course, taking jobs from people? So they are trying to convince people in small towns that this thing that is known to take away jobs is actually somehow going to increase jobs. Just again, if you feel like you're being talked to like an idiot, you probably are being talked to like an idiot. But former township supervisor Sandra Newman said, who cares? And again, maybe it's like, more jobs in the beginning until they figure a way how to cost effectively fire you. That's certainly happening. There was another article this week kind of about how scheduling software is making a lot of other people's occupations null and void. What do we need money? What do we need the money for? We like it here. We don't need a mall. We don't need 5 new restaurants. We're here because this is what we love, said Newman. The group is raising thousands of dollars through a GoFundMe and getting people to sign a petition calling for the project to be voted down. We have way over 5,000 signatures. It's not just us. There's neighboring communities that this is going to affect also, said Lynn Fleck, who lives up the road from the proposed data center site. In response, the township sent us a statement saying, in part, the township will administer its zoning and land development regulations in a fair and objective manner. The township encourages and values public engagement throughout the process. But neighbors, Fleck said, she doesn't want her supervisors to be objective. They should be backing us, said Fleck, and they're not worried that they might, and they're worried that might not be the case. In a newsletter sent out by IBEW Local 102, it mentions Supervisor Board Chair Chris Cook saying he's working diligently to get this across the finish line. 69 News, can't believe they kept that, reached out to Cook, but he just directed us to the township's official statement. Neighbors said they'll keep fighting with or without support from the township. I'm very hopeful we'll stop it and we'll keep them off of our farms, but it's going to be a fight, said Hackenberg. So, and these are the people who are continually going to be the victims of stuff like this, because it's like, obviously, it's like they need room for data centers. So they're going to go to these more, wilderness dense places where people have gone to escape things like this. And they also know it's like, okay, well, this is a small town and there's not that many people. If we have to fight the people, there's going to be a lot less of us to fight. And Christopher Fungi, our great dictator, said in his email to me, that the Atlantic article he sent to me, and I haven't gotten time to get completely through it because it was only sent to me today. And again, it's a 45-minute read. But the gist of the article is about how AI may affect the U.S. workforce compared to other historical advancements. Some of the jumping off points that he's interested in were, number one, manufacturing impact, 2001, China's increase in production and its impact on small warehouses and factories in the U.S. South. 2, Trade Adjustment Assistance, the TAA program, which is the 1975 program to train and relocate people who lost wages, and then he says extension for AI displacements, ? And then 3, premium for human hours in consulting work. He said, I'm also interested in the impacts of data warehouses, economic, environmental, nearby home valuations, etc. That's interesting, in a place where we care so much about uh what everything costs and our value in capitalism. Home valuations is very interesting. And then this is from the Atlantic. If you are interested in reading the longer article from the Atlantic, it's from the technology section, and it says America isn't ready for what AI will do to jobs. Does anyone have a plan for what happens next? And this was from February 10th, 2026. But there is also an additional piece that he sent me from Tangle, from the subscribers only part of Tangle, which is a data center debate between two of the editors from Tangle. And we used Tangle here before. I subscribe as well, but I don't do the paid version, but I do subscribe to Tangle. It's interesting. And this is by Ari Weitzman and Lindsay Newth. And this says, let's debate data centers. Two Tangle editors square off on the topic. All right. The data center debate. You've probably heard the saying that all politics is local, even as you observe national political issues increasingly trickling down to the local level. However, when it comes to data centers, the old adage is coming true again. Local issues are driving debate in the halls of Congress. Data centers are facilities that house critical information technology, IT infrastructure, such as servers, storage systems, and networking equipment. They aren't a new invention. They've provided the backbone for cloud services and internet applications for decades. And that is a point that I have made. It's like none of this is new. It's just moving at a much, much swifter pace right now. And so all the problems that we were having initially, we're going to be having a lot more of and a lot faster. But the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence has created massive demand for new hubs. AI companies use the IT infrastructure within data centers to train and deploy their models, which require huge amounts of compute power to run reliably and a lot of electricity to operate and cool. Today, many new data centers are being built expressly to support AI. I also know that I keep saying data and then data, but it's just because I like to say it both ways and I can't decide on which way. So I'm just going to keep changing it back and forth and keep you guys on your toes. Also, when we talk about corporations, again, it's often discussed on the show that the discussions around something like for example, recycling often is thrust upon the individual person. Like, we're all separating shit in our kitchens and like, what kind of an impact is that really making? I'm not saying don't recycle. I recycle, of course. But, when we really, think about the environmental impact, it's really being made on a large level by these corporations that are creating tons and tons of waste every single, I don't know, day, maybe. I don't know how many tons they're creating, but that's the brunt of the issue is coming from corporations. So now they already have that. They were already having such a bigger environmental impact than the individual person. And now every company is in some way or another integrating AI. Again, and we talked about this on GWF this past week, but when you go on the subway in New York City right now, it is crazy. I spend a lot of time reading subway ads because I'm on the subway a lot. So I just look up and, a lot of times they're interesting. They make them interesting because, we're New Yorkers, so they can make them a little bit more foul than they can probably make them in other cities. But I always read the subway ads. I'm always, interested to see what's going on in the city, what they think commuters are valuing. And in the past, I don't know, it started maybe last year with like the AI necklace that was supposed to be your friend that everyone in the city was making fun of. But since then, almost all the ads online, which used to be like a lot for like dating apps or breast augmentation or things like that I guess they think people are talking about or thinking about when they're dissociating and riding the subway to and from work, it has now changed into AI and whatever AI changes companies have made and how you can put together a portfolio faster or do this faster or, so what used to take you 3 hours is now going to take you, 2 minutes with AI. Like every single ad is are companies promoting the AI changes they made. And it's really crazy. And additionally, what I will say is I think the ads are like too advanced because like I understand that they are trying to promote whatever AI integration they have made, but half the time I don't even understand what they're trying to say the AI is doing. Like it's making stuff easier, faster, cheaper, basically. But other than that, a lot of times I'm like, I don't even really exactly know what you're trying to promote here. And I am someone who I do feel is like pretty AI savvy. Like I know a lot of great things that you can use AI to do, ways to organize. But I have like I'm like I have no idea what you're doing. All right. So it says here today, many new data centers are being built expressly to support AI. That push has generated blowback from residents of the towns and rural communities where new facilities are being constructed. Water use, land use, and electricity use are among the most prominent concerns. Some reports have found that large data centers use 5 million gallons of water per day, equivalent to the water use of a town of 10,000 to 50,000 people. And U.S. data centers consumed 183 terawatt hours of electricity in 2024, roughly 4% of the country's total electricity consumption and approximately equal to the annual electricity demand of Pakistan. By 2030, that consumption is expected to more than double. Concern about data centers' impact has begun to translate into local action. Last week in Festus, Missouri, voters ousted all 4 incumbent city council members running for re-election after the council approved construction of a $6 billion data center. That same day, voters in Port Washington, Wisconsin, passed a referendum by a 2-to-1 margin restricting incentives for future data center projects. And on Tuesday, Maine lawmakers passed a bill that would freeze approvals for data centers requiring more than 20 megawatts of power until October 2027 to allow for a review of the facility's effect on the local grid, electric bills, air quality, and water. Some efforts to restrict construction have turned violent. Last week, an Indianapolis council member said over a dozen shots were fired at his house, and a handwritten note was left on his doorstep reading, "No data centers." The suspect is still at large. Even as citizens turn against these projects, states continue to compete to house them. Lawmakers at all levels of government argue that data centers will be an economic boon, creating new jobs, tax revenue, and future business opportunities, which, like, it's not good for the environment, but, like, yeah, I guess it's a possibility, although I don't believe them. I guess it could be a possibility that in losing some old jobs to AI, we will create new ones. I guess that is the hope with technology. And, you know, we've certainly seen that. So many more jobs now exist in online spaces than did even 20 years ago. And there was that, again, I saw this while I was running for mayor, but there was some kind of investigation, not even an investigation, but like surveys being done that, you know, the reason that most people were getting kicked out of their jobs. No, I'm reading it off another screen. That's why I'm not doing it. I have to have it on the screen. Yeah, I can't for this article. It's on a different screen. A lot of times the article, the conversation was about how people were like getting, you know, they couldn't keep up with the technology at their own jobs. And this was a huge problem, especially for older people who maybe had, 5 years left in the workforce. And they're like, I have to learn, a completely new way of life at my job that I've been doing for 20, 30 years, whatever it is. So this is interesting, right? Let's see. Lawmakers and AI leaders also say data centers are critical to ensuring AI models have sufficient compute power to keep the U.S. on the cutting edge of the technology and able to address national security risks. The Trump administration has designated data center development as a national priority, issuing an executive order in July 2025 to speed up permitting for new projects, allocate federal land for construction, and provide loans, grants, and tax incentives for new facilities. Many states have created similar incentive structures. The data center debate has been a fixture of conversation among Tangle staff in recent weeks. As AI becomes an increasingly salient topic in U.S. politics, we thought now was a good time to bring those conversations to the page in a brand new format. Today, managing editor Ari Weitzman and associate editor Lindsay Newth debate their positions on the future of data centers. Each will share an opening argument covering the tenets of their perspective. Then they'll respond to each other's points. Their primary arguments were developed in isolation, then shared simultaneously on Thursday. After reviewing the other's piece, they developed their rebuttals. We hope this format models constructive disagreement. Most importantly, we hope it is thought-provoking and encourages you to discuss these issues among friends and family in our comment section or over email. As always, we welcome your thoughts and feedback. And don't email Tangle, but email me withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. Again, not just I'm interested in everyone's opinions, of course, but not just I hate AI. If you're going to say I hate AI, that's great. Give me reasons why that are well thought out and complex rather than just it's bad for the environment. Yeah, a lot of things are bad for the environment. Commercial airlines are bad for the environment. Just talk a little bit more in depth. In general, technological advancements are bad for the environment, but the hope is that maybe we can then use these tools to save the environment. I don't know. That's my hope. Ari's perspective, build more. I don't trust AI. In general, I'm pro-human in all things, in how we think and write and live. And I want a future where humans can live as happily and harmoniously as possible. Well, my rebuttal, Ari, is we're so far past that already. I am not convinced that the future of our economy inevitably will be, or even should be, powered by artificial intelligence. When I close my eyes and dream of my ideal world, its landscape isn't dotted with data centers that would take up the better part of Manhattan. Yet, even in my most optimistic future, I believe we will need more data centers. That may seem like a contradictory viewpoint, but my position is simple. The benefits of new data centers outweigh the costs, and we should build more of them. I'm not arguing for unchecked, orgiastic development of data centers. I just think that we clearly need more to prepare for even a modest projection of our future compute needs. Until the AI boom, most data centers used a model called colocation, a business model for providers to rent out server space and computing power as a third-party resource for tech companies. Many current data centers operate at the megawatt level, including some new collocated builds. For context, 10 MW is roughly the equivalent of the power demand for 5,000 to 10,000 homes. Most new data centers are being built for the exclusive use of large companies called hyperscalers like Google, Microsoft, Meta, and Amazon. Today, hyperscalers are building gigawatt-level data centers, 1,000 megawatts, about the energy demand needed to power all the homes in Pittsburgh. Meta is currently building a 1 gigawatt data center in Indiana and another in Louisiana that could grow to an almost incomprehensible 5 GW. When I think about other possible uses for all that energy, I get squeamish. I want a society less dependent on energy consumption. At a time when energy production is getting costlier and concern about greenhouse gas emissions is rightfully high, we're devoting all this energy power to power AI, something that feels cold, remote, and soulless. But consider these 2 points. One, we will use this energy. That's almost a given. Global demand for data centers is expected to increase by 16% year over year for the next several years. To meet that demand, we can either A, retrofit old centers while we rely on other countries to build facilities that serve our domestic needs, or B, build new state-of-the-art ones in logistically strategic areas to maximize efficiency. That's no choice at all. 2, we will use this energy. By that, I mean that faceless tech companies are building data centers to meet the demands of us, the consumers. If you watch Netflix, listen to Spotify, upload your pictures to Apple or Google, or communicate via Slack or Teams, then you are using traditional data centers, which was kind of my point when, and again, I when people started going so hardcore against ChatGPT when it first came out, and still are. But I was kind of just it's guys, this is not new. It's not like you weren't using energy before. Again, it's the pace. I get it, but all this technology, where did you think it was coming from? If you use Google search, Amazon Alexa, Gmail, or Prime Video, then you are using hyperscaler data centers. And if you work remotely, then you really use data centers. Interconnectivity between our daily lives and remote compute power is increasing. And with AI, it will increase more. Even if you think you don't use AI, you do. Maybe you don't use Claude or ChatGPT, but just using the internet means you're using companies that use AI for search optimization, advertisements, price calculation, and the day-to-day operations of their businesses. To exist in the interconnected modern world is to depend on the services that data centers provide, even if secondarily. The scale of these buildings may be off-putting and feel almost dystopian, but when you think about it, a lot of modern utilities feel that way. Giant water processing plants, power generating stations, and landfills all have their own local environmental effects, but they provide scaled up service that our society cannot function without. You don't get the efficiency of a city like New York without Bowery Bay wastewater and the Fresh Kills landfill. And the same logic that goes into running and maintaining landfills goes into building and leveraging giant data centers. They're unsightly, and you definitely wouldn't want to live next door to one, but their environmental impacts are frequently overstated, and you also wouldn't want to live without them. Critics of data centers sometimes frame the argument as a choice between doing something bad and simply not doing something bad. But that's not the decision. The choice isn't between your current life with new giant data centers being built and the same life without them. The choice is between a future that continues to allow for more automation and connectivity and one that requires more manual processes, more travel for work, more highways, and more greenhouse gas emissions due to vehicular travel, as well as traffic deaths. I think he's pushing it on that one, but I hear him. Most of the pushback I hear directed at data centers treats them as a kind of avatar for all that is wrong and scary about future tech. They'll use up all our water, they'll cause climate change, and they'll power AI that takes our jobs. Never mind that those first two arguments are copy-pasted from concerns about cryptocurrency and are really larger expressions of anxieties over server usage. All these arguments fail under scrutiny. They'll use our tap water. This one is popular misunderstanding to the point of being totally fake, as AI researcher Andy Masley made clear with his excellent reporting on this issue. Data centers use water on site in one way to cool their processors. Some older data centers use cooling or evaporative cooling, which requires constant water. Next-gen data centers and some current ones use closed-loop water-to-chip cooling, which is far more efficient than air or evaporative cooling and allows for consistent reuse of water, reducing water usage by 70% compared to evaporative methods. Most of the calculated water use for data centers comes from the power plants that deliver them electricity. We don't think of any other process that requires energy as uniquely water intensive, but still, even if you include both on-site and off-site demand, the amount of water needed for the projected 2030 power supply will be about 8% of the total demands of US golf courses. It could be even lower if they are able to use more efficient forms of power like nuclear energy. More on that below. They'll cause climate change. In 2023, the last year with comprehensive figures, data centers produced 103 megatons of carbon dioxide through their energy consumption, about 2% of total US emissions. That's a lot, but the energy demands for data centers are far from leading the charge. The largest sectors for greenhouse gas emissions will remain travel and industry, and studies haven't been performed yet on how much data centers could reduce the carbon load of those industries. By powering digital technology, data centers reduce the need for travel for in-person work. And that is a good point. I am still always floored when one of my friends is like, oh, I got to go to Japan for work. I got to go to Ireland for work. And I'm like, what is possibly needs to be done in person in that way, especially for the fields that they're in. I have no idea. Furthermore, next-gen data centers are planning to reduce their energy needs through on-site power, meaning a mix of natural gas, wind farms, solar, and even small modular nuclear reactors. This is still aspirational, but if building data centers allows SMR companies to scale up to sustainable business models and help solve the thorny problems of regulation and financing, then the carbon offset of contributing to a nuclear future alone will make these ventures a net positive for climate change. They'll take our jobs. Like any new technology, AI proliferation will likely do away with some jobs, but create different ones, which is exactly what I said earlier. Building data centers has generated 216,000 new construction jobs since 2022, and the data center industry alone contributes millions of jobs to the economy. The effects that AI will have on work, especially the bottom rungs of the career ladder, could be considerable. But that's more of a problem to solve about how we'll apply AI rather than how we'll build the logistical capacity to service it. You may not want AI to scale up at all, but new and better data centers are still worth the cost, even if they only replace the less efficient ones we currently have. If you truly don't use tech in your life, then maybe you don't need the services data centers provide. And congrats on finding a way to read this. Cunty and unnecessary. But if you do, then you too should want a new data centers to be built. And then this is the counterpoint. Lindsay, slow building. Last week, voters in Port Washington, Wisconsin faced a novel question on their ballots. Should the city require voter approval to go forward with projects that receive tax incentives of over $10 million? The referendum came after local opposition failed to stop an Oracle OpenAI data center project despite alleged closed-door negotiations and a lack of published impact reports on the project's local efforts. The four-building campus will span roughly 700 acres. To see just how long the project extends, check out this nearly 2-minute video a Tangle reader shared on our subreddit after driving by the construction site. The results were decisive. In a county an hour from the town where I grew up, a county that opted for Trump in 2020 and 2024, 66% of voters said yes, no more data centers without community consent. The saga in Port Washington reflects similar battles happening across the country in which broad, cross-partisan coalitions demand greater transparency from companies that have faced little pushback from the White House and Wall Street. And I think that's great. I think we need so much more transparency across the board, right? You know, when I'm thinking about transparency, I'm thinking of the conversation that AOC recently had about CVS and how they kind of own everything related to your health. Americans are far more likely to hold negative views of data centers' effects on the environment, energy costs, and people's quality of life nearby than to note positives about tax revenue or job growth. At the same time, top AI leaders are pushing the build out at a staggering pace and cost. Over the past few weeks, I've sought to understand the two sides at the center of this infrastructure boom. Are data center opponents really NIMBYs with imaginary fears? Oh, that's so funny. I literally said NIMBY before I even read this part. Are data center opponents really NIMBYs with imaginary fears? Are the concerns over water and electricity use overstated? After digging through the evidence, I believe communities on the whole are right to be skeptical, not just of the environmental costs of these data centers, but of the public benefit brought by hyperscaling artificial intelligence technologies. As we reported in a video back in October, data centers are straining local grids due to their intensive electricity demands, and in some regions, data center growth has been shown to contribute to higher electricity bills for residents. These structures need massive amounts of energy to run, with an estimated 56% of the energy required between September 2023 and August 2024 deriving from fossil fuels like coal and natural gas. The reliance on fossil fuels to power data centers is adding pollution to the air and might push back at least one state, Nevada, off of its clear energy goal for 2030. U.S. data centers were responsible for about 2.2% of energy-related U.S. emissions in 2023, 105 million tons of CO2, or more than 1 out of every 45 tons. Because of that high demand, CEOs look for sites with cheap power and lots of land far from their offices in Silicon Valley, like Wisconsin and Iowa, where my family lives. Comparing data centers to other industries helps us understand its resource consumption, but it doesn't negate it. We can criticize the water demands of golf courses and factory farming and recognize that future data center growth will add to the problem, especially now in a period of water stress across much of the country. We should be intensely cautious about not worsening the situation by quickly greenlighting projects before we fully understand their impacts. Andy Masley, a prominent critic of concerns over AI water and electricity use, I spoke to for this piece describes widely reported events like taps running dry in Newton County, Georgia, after Meta came to town as one-off problems limited to the construction process and ungeneralizable to other projects. And I readily admit that opposition groups have overstated the water demands of data centers. No, the Port Washington project will not drain Lake Michigan, but focusing too much on debunking alarmist claims risks ignoring other verifiable harms that people who live near data centers are already experiencing. When data centers demand large amounts of power from a local grid, they can use incidents if supply and demand aren't in line. Residents of Data Center Alley in Loudoun County, Virginia, one of the country's densest data center hubs, describe an unbearable high-pitched whine audible from homes half a mile away. Events that are now considered one-offs will proliferate as planned projects enter their next phases. All of these environmental impacts give localities valid reasons to question and reject data center proposals. The long-term employment numbers are more straightforwardly discouraging. Data centers offer a decent amount of jobs up front for design and construction, but operational or permanent jobs are far fewer. And that's kind of what I was thinking when they were like construction jobs. I'm like, okay, but like what happens when all the, data centers are constructed? That's not going to go on forever. Across 5 economic impact studies compiled by Brookings, the ratio is stark. Thousands of initial construction jobs, and then at most a few hundred operational jobs. The data we have now shows that these centers do not offer communities meaningful long-term employment. This is not a career that you can get in for 20, 30 years, Beyond these debates over water, energy, jobs, and community consent are valid concerns about the technology that data centers are increasingly housing. AI industry leaders describe a world of utopian abundance in order to energize investors. CEOs like Dario Amodei and Sam Altman are highly skilled at constructing narratives around where AI could take us in the future, but we don't yet live in that future. We don't actually know which direction the arms race over AI will take us. We don't even know if achieving artificial superintelligence is good for humanity. We do know, however, that the top AI companies, including OpenAI and Anthropic, have shifting missions and shrinking safety departments. They are signing classified government defense contracts and preparing for trillion-dollar IPOs. AI labs are building networks of data centers in the Middle East, some of which are currently being targeted by Iran, and engaging in circular investment deals. It's hard for me to trust these companies to protect human rights to privacy and work in a world where AI is smart enough to undermine those rights. The question I keep returning to is simple. Why is this all happening so fast? Rather than ramping up the fight, top companies should be slowing down. They should be focused on forging international alliances to press pause on advanced systems, building models that do not encourage violence or psychosis, and signing on to not lobbying against state and federal regulation. It's interesting because at this point to me, it's like a lot of these, and I know at this point in the conversation, they're just presenting these blindly without seeing each other. These are not the rebuttals. These are the initial statements. Because to me, it's like, well, my feelings on it is, kind of a mix of these two things. Like I agree with a lot of the things that this writer is saying. I agree with that. We can't trust these people. That a lot of it is on like, yes, this is hypothetically what AI should do for us in the future, but we have absolutely no proof of it, and the risk is high. But I also am very interested in what the previous writer says, especially with kind of the conversation about like technology is always going to be moving forward. And as much of an environmental impact as this will have, lots of other things have an environmental impact too. And this is actually lower than some other industries or multiple other industries. For building data centers that requires understanding data centers' long-term impacts on nearby communities. Yeah, they're going to get fucked for sure. And mandating public transparency during the proposal, permitting and construction stages. Without those overhauls to the deal-making process, and at a time when laws regulating data centers' water and electricity use are just beginning to be rolled out in some states, we're not at a place to responsibly keep building. And I understand why communities around the country are feeling such resentment and frustration. The rhetoric proponents used to pitch data centers is not helping either. Framed as a zero-sum decision, people are told they won't have uninterrupted access to the internet without saying yes to the data center builds. No data centers means no Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. Well, that would be a positive thing. Reads a letter about a future data center in my mom's hometown of Clinton, Iowa. This ultimatum just isn't true. A demand for artificial intelligence is behind this build out, and it's a false dichotomy to say one or even hundreds of data centers that don't yet exist will determine our ability to access social media. McKinsey estimates that by 2030, about 70% of total data center capacity demand will be for AI-ready facilities, with generative AI alone accounting for roughly 40% of total demand. It's frustrating that these answers place the burden on users, suggesting we have no choice. This is the future. They are coming, State Senator Lisa Boscola, Democrat from Pennsylvania, told residents in February. Not only do Americans have to place our economy atop a race to AGI we never agreed to in the first place, but we also have to live next door to a center to keep us in the running. This logic seems eerily similar to the argument social media companies employ to justify the capture of our personal information. And I think it's like, if you're going to use the American economy at large as a reason why we need to have data centers, you're going to have to make it so that the individual average American is seeing that in their bank account. Otherwise, no family, no leader of a family of four gives a fuck about like the global economic placement of America. They want to know, do I have more money in my bank account to feed my family or to take my fucking family to Disneyland? Like, I don't understand why this is so hard for people to understand. If the individual American is not seeing this economy increase reflected in their own bank account, they don't give a flying fuck for the most part. Understanding the costs and benefits of hosting a data center is incredibly difficult. Each deal looks different, short versus long-term tax revenue. Each place is different. Can this watershed sustain the data center's demands? And information on data centers' impacts is sensationalist in both directions. It can feel impossible for local residents to know how to feel about a proposal. Parsing the numbers is made hard by the lack of public transparency involved in these deals. At the end of the day, community input is essential to going forward with any project of this size. Indeed, Pennsylvania residents in Montgomery County and Northampton County recently said they'd rather pay higher taxes than move forward with a center that would replace farmland or potentially harm the environment. Constituents are clearly taking a stance. They're gathering signatures, forming grassroots coalitions, showing up at town meetings to say that they value keeping their land the way it is over the potential financial benefits of data centers that resistance is building, and we should listen. And this especially makes sense for the types of places where data centers are being built, because these are not Manhattanites. It's the same people getting the data centers built in their town are not the same people benefiting from the data centers. And that, I think, is where the core disconnect is. I am not naive. Data center projects will continue to be proposed across Main Street America. If communities are open to them, they deserve the best deals they can get. And now more than ever, they can get good deals. This moment offers unique leverage for local governments, particularly in rural places. They can negotiate to achieve increased compute for schools, colleges, and research centers, long-term guarantees on tax revenues, company stocks for data center employees, and more. When we give residents the information and time to decide if a project is right for them, we accept that the rapid data center build out that top AI companies desire may not be feasible, and that is okay. Now, Ari's response to Lindsay's take is, I'm happy to concede what I think are Lindsay's strongest points. Estimates of job creation through AI and building data centers are either overinflated or temporary or both. Critiques about water use or energy use can't be brushed aside by comparing them to industries that also should be critiqued by their resource demands. These facilities have outsized effects on the communities where they're located. All of that is true. I'll add in response that data centers do still create economic opportunities. I'm bullish on the future tech that can power data centers, and future data centers mitigate the larger concerns of noise and grid demand. Doesn't that mean that we should be building those new on-site energy closed loop cooling giant remote data centers? And here I'll take Lindsay's central point head on. Her central point being, not only do Americans have to place our economy atop a race to AGI we never agreed to in the first place, but we also have to live next door to the data center to keep us in the running. This logic seems eerily similar to the argument social media companies employ to justify the capture of our personal information. First, we are agreeing to this every day. These systems are embedded in consumer-facing products we use at the individual level. Raise your hand if you've ever used ChatGPT or Claude, or if you have an Echo Dot, Google Nest, or Ring doorbell. Even if you avoid AI personally, it's still built into enterprise level applications we utilize at the companies we buy from and work for. And as with social media companies selling your behavior patterns to advertisers, that's something you have the power to change. Don't use the tools if you don't want to. Again, I think this is a little bit of a weak argument, easier said than done, right? It's like, okay, well, you're not going to be like a Luddite. Like, you're not going to just like remove yourself from society and not use like the search tools that other people were like we're being obscene here, you know? Sure, OpenAI and Anthropic won't care about your one personal choice, but personal choices add up. The marketplace is supply and demand. If the demand isn't there, then these AI tools won't scale. And again, it's like, I think it's like taking too much of the responsibility off of these large companies, because like the individual just does, like we have to hold corporations to higher standards of ethics. Second, your community doesn't need to welcome a new data center. One person I spoke to in the data center industry told me construction proposals get shut down all the time. And that's what I was saying before. Like there is a lot of success when the community comes together of shutting these down. So if there's one coming to your town and you don't want it there, organize, mobilize. The ones they do build often come with agreements to provide community benefits, like building out water infrastructure, supporting other local services, or helping to finance public parks, but make sure they are, stay good on their take. New projects will also need to comply with local ordinances restricting light and noise pollution. Again, make sure they stay true to their word. This is another one of those non-binary choices. It isn't to build or not to build. Communities can negotiate terms that are favorable to them before they agree to host data centers. It seems to me the debate isn't really over whether to build new data centers or not. We definitely should. It's really over how many to build and how we do it. I'll gladly agree that the pace and size of new data center builds are concerning and may even be superfluous. I'll also agree that we shouldn't encourage or allow AI companies to thoughtlessly pursue products that could be incredibly harmful. Here. But those are arguments for caution. They aren't arguments against innovating and constructing new data centers. As we wrote about on Thursday, Anthropic's public-facing tools are already degrading, likely due to a lack of compute power. So even if you don't want to work towards a future AI utopia, you just want to ask Claude a question sometimes, new data centers are needed. And here's Lindsay's response. Even coming in blind with different theses and viewpoints on a divisive issue, I think Ari and I are working off a shared set of facts and agree on a lot. We both think data centers would not be fun neighbors. Neither of us wants to see the human world overtaken by AI. We agree that unchecked, or as Ari so evocatively put it, orgiastic data center development is bad. Ari also put forth something that I hadn't thought of and found thought-provoking, connecting more and newer data centers to the proliferation of nuclear energy and the reduction of automobile deaths. Again, I got to look into this a little bit more, because like, how much of an impact could this have on automobile deaths? I mean, obviously a lot of people die from automobile deaths, but I'm just like, is this really going to, people will still be traveling, I appreciated his reminder that we all use the internet and rely in part on these data centers. I, after all, typed this in a Google Doc on an Apple computer, but I remain at odds with some of Ari's central claims. He writes that we should be open to more data centers because we will benefit from a more connected and automated society. I'd point out that the group that makes up the first we is meaningfully different from the group that makes up the second we. In most industries that require large swaths of physical infrastructure, but in AI particularly, the beneficiaries, exactly what I said, and the losers are stratified by class and geography. The losers lose their jobs and live next to data centers, and the winners make a lot of money and don't live next to data centers. This is like a really, really important argument for data centers. And also like just kind of the American way in general. It is not specific or unique to data centers. We can also, another thing that I was thinking of is, about war and the military, and how the people who make the decisions to go to war, who benefit from, winning a war, even though, I kind of am of the school of thought that no one wins a war, but the people who are definitely losing at war are fucking poor people who have to go into the military because that's their only chance at, going to college, or that's something that really, really work for them and will benefit for them. Maybe it's something that'll keep them out of the prison system. Any way you shake it, like, I just really feel. And I know some people have had a really great experience in the military. It changed their life. It got their, they say, yeah, I was a bad kid or whatever in quotes. And it really did get me into a place where I can have a beneficial life. I would argue back to you that, there was probably a lot of other variables that made you quote unquote a bad kid. Maybe your parents were working 2 jobs and weren't giving you the support they needed. Maybe you didn't fucking have enough money. Maybe you didn't have a good education system. And so you were bored in school because you were in a school system that was, where people were talking and disruptive during class, and you weren't able to learn at the capacity that you might have been able to. I mean, I could go on and on all day. But anyway, some people are mildly helped by AI and some mildly harmed. Ari compared AI development to wastewater treatment or landfills, but even those are different, much more essential industries. We have no choice but to build those projects the best we can, lest sewage and trash fill the streets. If we don't build more and newer data centers that will largely power artificial intelligence, we might slow the output of new anthropic models or put a strain on OpenAI's revenue, but we will carry on. Ari relies on corporate projections of demand to map out our future needs, but those forecasts are profit companies estimate they can reach in the future, separate from necessary or set in stone growth. If we all agree that no one wants to live next door to a data center, why wouldn't we be okay with adding friction to hyperscalers' business plans by opposing a rapid, massive build out? All right. So I know that was like rather long, but I just know that you guys are really interested in AI, and data centers was definitely like a theme of the news this week. I saw it a lot. So I thought this was a good week to share this particular article and to talk about that. So thank you to our amazing dictator, Christopher Fungi, for presenting that to us. And here I have to get back on my other screen. I have like 8 screens going here. All right. Now we can we'll wrap up the show with maybe like 2 more articles. I'm going to go into the FBI Beastie Boys because that was one of the main stories. I don't think it's overall super important, but I just thought it was kind of interesting story that did stand out to me this week for sure. So let me just move this to another screen and get on top of this. All right. So here we go. This is from The Independent. And this says Kash Patel posts FBI hype video set to Beastie Boys after SNL humiliation. This is from May 4th. FBI director posts videos celebrating the Bureau after lashing out at reports he accuses of failing to report on his accomplishments. Well, it's like when we don't like you, we're probably not going to, report on your accomplishments, right? So facing growing criticism of his leadership at the FBI, or lack thereof, some would argue, under President Donald Trump, Kash Patel has resorted to posting videos touting the Bureau's accomplishments on social media set to the music from Guns N' Roses and the Beastie Boys. And one MO of this administration is they love to incorporate pop stars and rock stars who have not given their consent to use their stuff. The director of the nation's top law enforcement agency, who was lampooned by comedian Aziz Ansari on Saturday Night Live over the weekend, posted a video Monday morning using the theme of the week, AI-generated clips from the Beastie Boys' 1970s cop show-inspired Sabotage music video interspersed with FBI footage and news clips. I'm like, I mean, if you guys know anything about the Beastie Boys, you know they're not going to be on board with all of this. On Saturday, hours before Ansari portrayed a hyperactive and bug-eyed Patel on SNL, the director posted a similar FBI highlight reel set to "You Could Be Mine" by Guns N' Roses, whose lead singer Axl Rose has repeatedly blasted the president and other administration figures. And so they're probably just taunting, each other back and forth at this point. Like it would be too easy for them to use a country music star who's a conservative. They're going to use work from artists who are going to get pissed off of from it, because I think that brings them a great sense of joy, a great sense of control, a great sense of fuck you. I won't do what you tell me. The FBI delivered the safest America under President Trump's leadership in the history of our country, Patel says in the self-congratulatory video. Patel is facing an avalanche of scrutiny over his handling of the FBI and allegations of alcohol abuse on the job, which he has vehemently denied. And then, he's on X. He's tweeting away, putting the video. The 48-year-old FBI director filed a $250 million defamation lawsuit against The Atlantic, which we talked about, and journalist Sarah Fitzpatrick over what his lawyers have labeled a sweeping, malicious, and defamatory hit piece about his leadership at the agency. It's so crazy because it's like you really have only time to do self-serving things. The recent profile published by the outlet characterized Patel as a deeply paranoid figure prone to drinking to excess. His alleged behavior has reportedly alarmed officials at the law enforcement agency and across the Trump administration, including the president. Aziz Ansari is so perfect to play him too. Patel has lambasted reporters over the Atlantic's coverage and questions about his behavior, including at a recent press conference where he lashed out at the fake news mafia and accused reporters of lying about him. Ansari satirized those outbursts on SNL. "You guys should not be reporting the lies and the gossip," the comedian said. "You should be reporting on the historic nature of my appointment. I'm a trailblazer. I'm the first Indian person to suck at their job." Really funny. More than a dozen House Democrats have launched an investigation into Patel's alleged drinking. And I think we talked about that specifically last week, and called on the FBI director to share the results of a screening with Congress. "I'm like an everyday American who loves his country, loves the sport of hockey, and champions my friends when they raise a gold medal and invite me to celebrate," Patel told reporters last month. This is fun because in this article, it was hard to tell where the SNL quotes began and where the Patel quotes began. They kind of were interchangeable. And this was what he said when he was reported, when reporters last month questioned him about video footage of him chugging beers with the U.S. Olympic men's hockey team. "I've never been intoxicated on the job, and that's why we filed a $250 million lawsuit." Well, I think it's easy not to be intoxicated on the job when you're not to be intoxicated on the job when you're consistently supposed to be on the job and you're out partying instead. So maybe that's more of the problem. So actually, thanks for pointing that out. Any one of you that wants to participate, bring it on. I'll see you in court. It's unclear whether the FBI obtained the artist's permission for use of their music in the videos, though it's extremely unlikely. And I mean, also, keep in mind, depending on which artist this is, a lot of artists don't own their own catalog. So they wouldn't even need to technically legally get permission from the artist. They would need to get permission from whoever owns the actual song. The Beastie Boys have rarely licensed their music for commercial use in the wake of the death of Adam Yauch, aka MCA, in 2012. And Adam Adrock Horowitz has called Trump a fucking racist, sexist, homophobe, and a scumbag. I can't wrap my head around it. He is the New York City rich elite who got duped by the motherfucker. I don't get it at all, he told the Daily Beast in 2017. Guns N' Roses frontman Axl Rose also has blasted Trump for using the band's music. The Independent has requested comment from the FBI and representatives for the Beastie Boys and Guns N' Roses. Patel, a former podcaster, has come under bipartisan fire over the agency's handling of the investigations into Jeffrey Epstein and the release of the millions of documents connected to the wealthy and well-connected sex offender who died in jail awaiting traffic trial on trafficking charges in 2019. Patel's latest efforts to boost his public image follow investigations into the chaos at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on April 25th. That came and went pretty quickly, didn't it? When a gunman charged through security in an attempt to target administration officials inside the ballroom, according to prosecutors. The suspect, 31-year-old Cole Allen, reportedly wrote that Patel was not included among those on an alleged hit list. Not even worth it, I think, probably. In the Guns N' Roses backed video, Patel is seen firing a weapon at a shooting range, speaking to reporters and wearing sunglasses and camouflage. These are the best numbers for fighting crime in U.S. history, Patel says, as he went to the Donald Trump, speech giving class, I guess. As the clip comes to a close with the FBI logo, it's letting good cops be cops, letting agents go out there and do the job they were trained to do. So, I mean, there's so many things that this administration continues to do that people are unhappy with. It continues to use artists who do not agree with them. And again, I feel like that's kind of like artistic rape in a way. Like, I feel like they're specifically probably like, targeting artists who have spoken out against them and using them on purpose. Because like, it's not fun to use Kid Rock because Kid Rock's gonna love that you're using Kid Rock, but it is fun to use Axl Rose and bastardize his music, which is his baby. Like, these people are out, like, they want to hit you where it hurts. Like, they want to hit you where it hurts. And this is also like, the government using AI for nonsense when it could be, doing other things. And, are they even as usual abiding by the law? Are they getting rights? Are they just using whatever? Are they just thinking that, well, this is a parody, so this falls under parody law, even though they're continuously suing people who they feel like are mocking them? Round and round we go. But again, just really highlighting the absolute immaturity of this administration and Kash Patel. Like, I don't really know what he spoke like before, but now he is just using the same kind of speech patterns that Donald Trump has been using for his entire presidency. All right. And we'll end right now the show with two women's issues. The sale of mifepristone, and then also the rape kit reform that I don't know if you guys saw who's behind it, but none other than Mariska Hargitay, big New York Knicks fan, and also a New York legend. Let's get this going. Okay. We love our Mariska here in New York. So this is from Deadline. Mariska Hargitay's End the Backlog campaign achieves rape kit reform in all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. This woman's living my dream life. She's making actual changes in our society. And also, I have to put this through archive. And also gets to be like a cool an artist, an actress, like really exciting stuff here. Sorry, I didn't know this one. Also, everything has a paywall now. There's like literally nothing that does not have a paywall at this point in time in our lives. All right. Here, I'm putting this down here. Oh boy. Please hold. Sorry, guys. All right, well, I might go to this other one while this is loading because this is insanely slow. All right, well, I'm going to go into this mifepristone article real quick before the rape kit one loads. Sorry to tease you with this, but, everyone's trying to make a buck. Oh my gosh, please stop making that sound. Okay. A maker of the widely used abortion pill mifepristone asked the Supreme Court on Saturday to block an appellate court ruling that cut off mail order access to the drug just a day earlier in what was the biggest jolt to abortion policy in the US since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Okay, so again, this is what to know about a mifepristone maker asking the Supreme Court to restore access to the pill by mail. Danco Laboratories, which is also a defendant in the lawsuit in question, asked to block the New Orleans-based 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals decision while appeals are pending, saying the appellate ruling injects immediate confusion and upheaval into highly time-sensitive medical decisions. The appeals court's unanimous ruling Friday marked a substantial victory for abortion opponents seeking to stem the flow of abortion pills prescribed online, which they view as subverting state bans. It requires that mifepristone be distributed only in person and at clinics, overruling regulations set by Federal Food and Drug Administration. We're going to see, I think, in a way that we haven't before, what the nation will look like when abortion bans are actually in effect, said Mary Ziegler, an expert on abortion and a professor at University of California at Davis School of Law. And, you can look into it a little bit more just because I'm in a bit of a time crunch here, but because our producer has to go. But here's what to know. So impact extends beyond states with abortion bans. And there's little precedent for this, right? So it says, frustrated with the lack of federal action against medicated abortions, Louisiana Attorney General Liz Muriel sued the FDA last year, saying allowing mifepristone to be dispensed through the mail undermined the state's ban on abortions at all stages of pregnancy. So basically, we're like, all the people who are pro-choice were just like, oh, okay, well, you can still get it online in most states. You can get it mailed to you. Like, we'll get it to you. And they said, absolutely not. We know this is going on. We're not going to allow this. Mifepristone, long considered safe and effective. Again, that's another thing. So anyone who's saying that it is not safe, that it is not effective, we've been using this for literally decades at this point. And it was approved back in 2000 as a safe and effective way to end early pregnancies. So any chatter that you hear otherwise is just not scientifically true. Abortion policy could come into play in the midterms. Obviously, we know that midterm's going to be, hopefully pretty rough for Republicans, but, we don't know. Again, when anytime surveyed, Americans are saying that they want, to have access to abortions. That is the most of Americans want to have access to abortions. So, even though the people who are anti-choice are some of the loudest voices, they are certainly not the majority of voices. That is 100% true. Why will not it let me into this article? This is so crazy. Maybe I can find it somewhere else. Mariska Hargitay rape kit. Okay, so I'm just going to take, oh my God, there's not one thing here. All right, I'm going to take it from the Hollywood Reporter instead because this Deadline one, Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, kind of interchangeable anyway, both industry-wide things. So this is Law & Order SUV star Mariska Hargitay's rape kit backlog campaign marks legislative wins in all 50 states. The actress and the Joyful Heart Foundation have reached a milestone 16 years in the making. Mariska Hargitay's Joyful Heart Foundation has achieved a milestone more than 1 decade in the making. On Friday, almost 2 decades, in fact. On Friday, it was announced that after 16 years, the End the Backlog campaign has successfully driven rape kit reform legislation in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. Maine became the final state to enact at least one of the campaign's 6 pillars of reform, marking a nationwide breakthrough in efforts to eliminate the backlog of untested rape kits and help prevent future backlogs. According to the End the Backlog, the 6 pillars of rape kit reform include mandating the submission and testing of all backlogged kits, requiring the testing of all new kits, creating statewide rape kit tracking systems, conducting statewide inventories, ensuring survivors have access to the status of their kits, and securing dedicated funding to support submission testing and tracking. Hargitay, best known for playing Captain Olivia Benson on Law & Order Special Victims Unit, founded the Joyful Heart Foundation in 2004 after her work on the NBC series deepened her awareness of the trauma survivors often carry. The organization's mission is to transform society's response to sexual assault, domestic violence, child abuse, support survivors, healing, and end violence. Central to that mission is the End the Backlog campaign, which seeks to eliminate the hundreds of thousands of untested rape kits stored across the United States so survivors can pursue justice and closure. I just think this is like amazing and an example of, first of all, like, actually learning from television. That's like the cool thing about SVU, and I think why so many people like it. It's like, most of those stories are based on real things that happened. And so it's giving us an eye into the legal system that I think a lot of times, we don't fully understand until we find ourselves in the legal system for better or worse, usually for worse. Today marks a watershed moment, not only for the state of Maine, but for every survivor who has asked if their rape kit was forgotten, if their truth was abandoned on a shelf, if they have hope of finding justice. Hargitay said in a statement to The Hollywood Reporter, this did not happen overnight. It happened because survivors spoke their truth. It happened because advocates refused to let urgency become complacency. It happened because Representative Geiger, Senator Bennett, and Senator Dewson, along with many other inspired legislators, championed a cause that demanded their persistence and years of dedicated work. And it happened because of our community insisted that every survivor deserves accountability, transparency, and dignity in the handling of their kit. This moment is a promise that the system can and will be transformed into a source of light, not darkness. Hargitay concluded, to the survivors who have carried this cause in their hearts, this milestone belongs to you. We are far from done, but how glorious to take this moment to honor how far we have come together. And, as someone who has done work in the rape and sexual assault field for, 13 years now, I know how hard it is to get things like this passed and how, much work and consistency and persistence, Mariska, Hargitay, and all the team. She's getting all the credit because she's the big name, but I'm sure there's many, many other people who are putting in tons of hours at the Joyful Heart Foundation. And so really, really cool use of the power that one has with fame. And I really, really love that she actually, took the time to do something positive with it, because so many people don't, or so many people kind of just do the bare minimum to make themselves look good. But she actually got legislation, changed, which is just so that is such a tireless effort. So good for her. I really appreciate that. Big ups, Mariska Hargitay, as if we didn't already love you enough. All right, that is our show for today. Again, I was trying to make it a 2-hour show just because Mike is out of town. And so we have AJ here, but AJ has to produce another show shortly. And also I want to get, I got to watch the Knicks game. So, that goes without saying, but thank you so much for joining us on Without a Country. I appreciate you guys so much. If you want to join the Patreon, it's patreon.com/withoutacountry, where you can join for as little as $6 a month. Again, thanks to AJ here. Thanks to Mike Harrington. Thanks to Crystal. And thanks to Alfred. Are you ready to say goodbye to your fans? Are you ready to say goodbye to your fans? Can you get up a little bit? You were walking all around before. Say bye to your fans. Thank you so much. I love you. Thank you for listening. Thanks for listening to my mommy show. All right, guys, I appreciate you being here. Remember, the truth is in there. If you want to send me an email, it's withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube, and make sure you're following me on social media at PhilanthropyGal and at Without a Country Podcast. I'll talk to you next week. Peace. Bye.